Welcome to Paranormal M, where we bring you stories that will leave you with more questions than answers. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay in the loop with our latest enigmatic tales. We hope you enjoy the ride. As I delve deeper into my childhood memories, I'm struck by the strange and inexplicable nature of our early years. There are certain memories that seem to defy explanation, such as my distinct recollection of levitating down the stairs of my childhood home. It was not a dream, for I have vivid memories of my dreams from that time, and this was something entirely different. What's most intriguing about this experience is that I'm not alone in it. There are countless others that have shared similar memories of levitating or floating during their childhood. It's as if there's a shared repository of experiences that we all tap into in our youth, a collective consciousness that binds us all together. But levitating is not the only shared memory that we seem to possess. I've read about others who recall about being able to breathe underwater, or being able to communicate telepathically with animals. These are not memories that can be easily explained away, and they leave us with more questions than answers. What is it about our childhood that allows us to tap into this collective consciousness? Is it simply a matter of our minds being more open and receptive at a young age? Or is there something more mystical at play? Some people believe that children are more in tune with the natural world and its energies, which allows them to experience things that are beyond our understanding as adults. Others believe that these shared memories are a product of a cultural legend, passed down through generations and ingrained in our collective subconscious. Still, others believe that there is a spiritual or metaphysical dimension to this phenomenon, connecting us to something greater than ourselves. The mystery of our shared memories is one that fascinated scientists and researchers for decades. Some have even conducted experiments in an attempt to uncover the truth behind these strange experiences. But despite their efforts, the phenomenon remains largely unexplained. Perhaps we'll never fully understand the mystery of our childhood memories, and that's part of what makes them so intriguing. Our early years are a time of wonder and magic, when anything seems possible, and the world is full of limitless potential. And it's these shared experiences that connect us to something greater than ourselves, binding us together in a web of shared memories and experiences that shape us who we are as individuals and as a society. So, as I continue to ponder the mysteries of my childhood memories, I'm reminded of the magic and wonder that exists in the world around us, and I'm grateful for the collective consciousness that binds us all together, connecting us to something greater than ourselves, and reminding us that the limitless potential that lies within each and every one of us. Thoughts about the movie The Night House. As I sit here reflecting on the movie I just watched, I can't help but be struck by the sheer brilliance of the way the ghost or demon was represented. The use of geometrical figures throughout the house was a stroke of pure creative genius, a way to convey to the audience that something was undeniably wrong and mysterious within the walls of the house. It was a clever way to communicate to the audience that the protagonist was not seeing things the same way the spectator was seeing them. And she was in a different angle altogether. The subtle but powerful message was not lost on me, and I found myself drawn into the story in a way that I haven't experienced in a long time. And then there is a last scene of this movie. Without giving away any spoilers, let me just say that it's nothing short of shocking. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I was left reeling long after the credits had rolled. It was a masterful representation of the ghost or demon or whatever you want to call it, and it left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the supernatural. Throughout the entire movie, the use of geometrical figures in a certain angle was an accurate and effective way to represent the ghost or demon. It was a subtle but powerful tool that helped to convey the otherworldly presence in a way that was both eerie and captivating. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, and I found myself completely engrossed in the story. All in all, I was blown away by the movie's representation of the supernatural. It was a masterful piece of storytelling that left me on the edge of my seat from beginning to end. I can't recommend it highly enough, and I'm sure it'll be a long time before I can see anything that'll top it. I seen my great-grandfather the morning of my daughter's birth. It was a bittersweet time in my life. Carrying my first child was a joyous occasion, but the passing of my great-grandfather left a void in our family. I had always admired him and looked up to him as a role model. He was a wise, kind, and always had a smile on his face. I was heartbroken at the thought that my child would never get to meet him and learn from him. It was a cold, dark morning when it happened. I was abruptly woken up at 5 a.m. by a sharp contraction. As I sat up in bed, still groggy from sleep, I noticed a figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was my great-grandfather, although his form was hazy and indistinct. I recognized his face immediately, but before I could even utter a word, he vanished into thin air. I was left feeling bewildered and shaken. Later that day at the hospital, I recounted my eerie encounter to my mother. She listened intently, then shared with me that she had been finding pennies in strange places all morning. Her theory was that our beloved one who had passed on leaves these coins behind as a sign that they're still watching over us. I was skeptical at first, but her explanation gives me some comfort. As the day wore on, strange things kept happening. My mother found another penny in her shoe, and my husband discovered one on his desk at work. It was as if my great-grandfather was leaving these coins for us in a way to let us know that he was still with us in spirit. But the most significant penny of all was the one that I found. As I glanced down at my big swollen belly, I noticed a shiny penny resting on it. It was as if my great-grandfather was saying, "I may be gone, but I'm still with you and I always will be." The penny was a small but powerful reminder that death doesn't mean the end of our connections to those we love. Years have passed since that fateful day, but I still think about my great-grandfather often. Every time I find a penny in an unexpected place, I can't help but smile and feel a sense of comfort. I'm grateful for the brief but meaningful encounter I had with him and for the signs he left behind to remind me that he's always watching over me and my family. Grandpa came back in a dream to save me from a miscarriage. As I sit here reflecting on the journey my husband and I have taken, I'm struck by the twists and turns that life can bring. Our struggle with infertility had been a long and difficult one, filled with moments of hope and despair. But throughout it all, we've clung to the belief that our loved ones are watching over us, guiding us through our most difficult times. It was almost 3 years ago that my grandpa passed, leaving a void in my heart that I thought could never be filled. He was my confidant, my mentor, my friend. And then, almost 2 years ago, my grandma followed him into the great beyond. I was devastated, but I knew that they were both at peace and watching over us. And so we embarked on the IVF journey. We knew that we weren't alone. We felt the presence of our loved ones urging us on and supporting us every step of the way. As the time drew near us to transfer our first baby, we were filled with nerves and trepidation. And then my mom called me and told me about a dream she had had. In the dream, she was at a truck stop surrounded by noise and chaos. She was at a phone booth, and sitting right behind her was my grandma. On the other end of the phone, my grandma, despite the noise and commotion, had kept saying one thing over and over. "Make sure she's on prednisone. She needs to be on prednisone." I was stunned when I heard it, for prednisone is known for its ability to be a natural-born killer of cells that cause miscarriages. It was as if my grandpa was reaching out in the form of this from beyond the grave, guiding us in our most difficult time. It was a powerful and humbling experience, one that filled me with a sense of awe and wonder. For in that moment, I knew that we weren't alone, that our loved ones were with us every step of the way, guiding us and supporting us as we embarked on this journey of life. And so, as we move forward, we do so with a sense of peace and purpose. We know that our loved ones are watching over us, and that they'll continue to guide us through the ups and downs of life. It's a comforting thought, one that fills us with hope and joy, even in our darkest moments. My husband's dog passed away, and I believe he came back for a final goodbye. As I sit here recounting the story of my husband's beloved dog Rocco, I'm struck by the deep bond that existed between them. For almost 17 years, Rocco had been a constant presence in our lives, a faithful companion who had seen us through the ups and downs of life. But as Rocco grew older, he began to suffer from health issues. Arthritis made it difficult for him to move around, and they found a tumor that added to his woes. Despite our best efforts to care for him, his condition worsened, and we knew that the time had come to say goodbye. It was a difficult decision, one that filled us with sadness and regret, but we knew that it was the kindest thing we could do for Rocco, to ease his suffering and let him go with dignity and grace. And so, we spent a final weekend with Rocco, cherishing every moment we had left with him. We showered him with love and affection, telling him how he loved him so much and how grateful we were for the joy he had brought into our lives. On the day we put him down, we did our best to keep ourselves distracted, to avoid dwelling on the pain and sadness that threatened to overwhelm us. My husband went to the gym, and I was walking upstairs when I saw a pee puddle. At first, I felt a surge of frustration and anger. After all, Rocco had often had accidents in the house, and I had grown used to cleaning up after him. But then something inside me shifted, and I felt a sudden wave of emotion. Was it possible, I wondered, that Rocco was saying goodbye in his own way? Was this his final gift to us? A reminder of his presence and his love? I couldn't help but laugh at the thought. Even as tears streamed down my face, for in that moment I felt a profound sense of connection to Rocco, a sense that he was still with us and in some small way, even though he was gone. And as I look back on that moment now, I'm filled with a sense of gratitude and wonder, for in the midst of our grief and sadness, Rocco reminded us of the power of love, of the enduring bond that exists between human and animal. Are there any convincing paranormal television shows? The debate over the authenticity of paranormal shows has raged on for years, with believers and skeptics constantly at odds. As someone who enjoys watching shows like The Holzer Files, I find myself constantly questioning the validity in the claims being made by the investigators. It's a difficult balance for these shows to strike, as they need to provide entertainment while still staying true to the events that are actually being portrayed. Despite this challenge, there are a few shows that stand out to me as particularly convincing. One such show is Paranormal Lockdown, which follows a team of investigators as they spend 72 hours in a haunted location. The show is unscripted, and the team uses a variety of different tools and techniques to try to communicate with any spirits that may be present. The show's emphasis on the scientific method of investigation, combined with the team's willingness to engage with the paranormal, creates a compelling and convincing viewing experience. Another show that I find intriguing is The Dead Files, which takes a unique approach to the paranormal investigation. The show features a retired homicide detective and a psychic medium working together to investigate paranormal activity. The show's format is unique, with the medium providing insights and impressions while the detective conducts a more traditional investigation. This allows for a multifaceted approach to the investigation, making the show both compelling and convincing. Of course, it's important to approach these shows with an open mind. While it's impossible to say for certain whether the events portrayed in these shows are real or not, they can still be fascinating glimpses into the world of the paranormal, whether you're a believer or a skeptic. These shows are sure to spark your imagination and keep you entertained, so sit back, relax, and let yourself be drawn into the mystery and intrigue of the paranormal world. Odd coincidences or spirits, music playing. The love and connection we all have with our grandparents run deep, and we want to honor them in the best way possible, by naming our son after each of them. But little did we know that this would lead to a series of unexplainable occurrences that left us feeling both intrigued and a bit spooked. Ever since our son was born, there's been a strange feeling in his bedroom that we're being watched as we put him to sleep. At first, we dismissed it as new parent jitters, but as time went on, it became more apparent that there was actually something else at play here. Our son would stare at one specific corner of the room and neither smile or give a blank stare, which led us to believe that he was seeing something that we couldn't. It was unnerving to say the least. We couldn't help but wonder if it was the presence of our grandfather looking over him. Adding another layer of intrigue to the story is the fact that both my mother and I regularly wake up at 4:39 a.m., which happens to be the badge number of my grandpa, who was a state trooper. It's a strange coincidence that we can't explain, but it's also comforting to know that he's with us in some way. But perhaps the most eerie occurrence was when my husband's childhood radio, which belonged to his late grandpa, after he passed away, the radio would randomly turn on and play music that they enjoyed together. It was a sweet reminder of his grandpa's love, but it's a bit creepy when it would happen unexpectedly. Now, as our son regularly wakes up screaming at 4:39 a.m., we can't help but wonder if there's a connection between all these occurrences. The last 2 nights, we went into his room to comfort him, and his music box was playing nursery music on its own, as if being activated by an unseen force. The music box is across the room and has to be pressed on by a button, and there's no explanation for how it could have been started playing on its own. It's a perplexing and unnerving situation that can't seem to find a logical explanation for. To make matters even more intriguing, when we brought our son into our bedroom, my husband asked him what was going on, and he responded by saying, I hear him in my ears." It's a chilling response that left us with more questions than answers. While we can't say for sure what's causing these events, we can't help but feel that there's something out of the ordinary happening. Whether it's a connection to our grandfather or something else entirely, we're left with a feeling of both unease and comfort, knowing that their love is still with us and guiding us through this perplexing situation. My kitten died a couple weeks ago, but I think he's still around. A bit after my childhood dog died, I felt a hole in my heart. She was old and I was ready for her to go, but the house still felt so empty. So I went to get a rescue kitten and ended up making it one of the best friends I ever had the pleasure of being around. Mace was the sweetest little boy, always wanting to be next to people and loved. He would sit on my lap and play video games with me, explore my office at work, and just be a little goofball. It seemed like he always did his best to keep me laughing, not to mention he legitimately did nothing wrong. He never threw up, never had an accident anywhere, and he was exceptionally clean. Fast forward 7 months, and my girlfriend and I took a week-long vacation. My mother had mentioned he wasn't eating as much, but we both thought he just missed me. Towards the end of my vacation, he stopped eating entirely, and when I got home, he noticeably lost weight. I spoon-fed him some wet food and hung out with him for the day after I got back. The next morning, my mother had brought him to the vet, where we had learned that he had FIP, and he was going to die in the coming days. His organs were floating in fluid at that point, and it started affecting his brain. We elected to put him down instead of letting him suffer, A decision I'm still not sure was the right one. I didn't want my friend to suffer, though. Even as he died, he was rubbing against my beard and nuzzling into my arms. I haven't stopped crying since I buried him next to my dog. The other night, though, I saw him at my feet when I was getting water in the middle of the night. Clear as day, I thought I was going crazy. But I was still happy, nonetheless. He was checking up on me. Just an hour ago, my mother called me to her room to tell me that her pillow had an impact, and then it was vibrating. He always jumped up on that pillow in order to wake her up, for snuggles, and later in the night she heard meowing. A few days prior at my girlfriend's house, I heard meowing from downstairs, and then saw her cat, one who can't meow by the way, run up with zoomies, only to return just as excited. This may all be coincidence, but I hope it's my friend making sure we're all okay, and meeting his would-be sister. How I knew ghosts were real. I only knew that when I was a kid and I moved into my childhood home, something was off. When I was around 8, we moved into my childhood home, and by that time I was 10, and I had seen ghosts multiple times. When I was younger, me and my cousin would have sleepovers together. We would all sleep in the same room. And one night we were all on the floor and we were watching YouTube under the covers, but my cousin had fallen asleep. He had always been scared of the dark, but when I peeked out of the covers about to turn over to sleep, I see a dark, huge figure of something. I still can't explain what the hell that was, but it gets even worse as time goes on. To give a quicker summary of my paranormal experience, I'll just say the ones I can remember. For context, my little brother has diabetes, so we're always having to watch his sugar. His sugar got so high one time that we had to go to the hospital, and he was severely sick for multiple days. After this, about a week later, we were all paranoid about him being home alone, because he just almost died. But one night I was sleeping in my room and I hear a scream, and it sounds like someone saying, "Help me." That sounded just like him. I went in there to see if he was okay, and he wasn't even in there. He was in his room asleep perfectly fine. Another thing is something grabbing my hair when I was in the shower and yanking it into the air, and then letting it fall back down. No joke. After the shower, I heard a woman screaming about her hair. Later on, we had found out that the last lady that owned the house had her ashes poured in the backyard, which I had no problem with at the time, but I still thought it was a bit creepy. Anyways, time goes on and it kind of calms down for a while, except with me and my friends playing Red Door, Yellow Door. If you don't know what Red Door, Yellow Door is, it's a game or a ritual, I guess, that you rub your friends' temples while changing, while they lay down and they fall into a deep, almost sleep in their brain, with multiple doors that you can enter with different colors on them. The person that's rubbing the temples is the host that tells the player what door they should go in, while the player is saying to us what they see. Look up to find out more. It's hard to explain. Do not play this game unless you fully understand what you're getting into. But anyways, we all played it all the time, and we would play it anywhere because we thought it was so fun to interact with the paranormal. So as time went on, we kept playing it, and we all started seeing figures in my house. And at one point, I woke up with a spider-like figure on top of me. And yes, I could completely move, so I was confused. My parents started seeing things more clearly. They would see and hear figures move around just like I did, even though they first didn't believe me at all. We see and hear figures all the time. One time my dad even asked out loud if a spirit is here, then turned the TV off, and then guessing what happened? The TV turned off. Anyways, back to the Red Door, Yellow Door. Eventually my friend could easily go into the game and could talk to the people that appeared in the game. We didn't know who these people were, but my friend described one as an old lady, a dark figure in a hat, which I had seen before in the attic of my house. and the spider-like creature that had been on top of me before. My friend asked the older lady what her name was and why all these spirits are in my house, because at this point I was ready to feel safe in my house again. The older woman said her name. Her name was the lady that had previously owned the house and had her ashes poured in the backyard. I was shocked, and I kept asking her questions, and my friend would tell her what she said back. She said she'd been watching me grow up. I still questioned her more to see if this was actually real, so I asked her what her husband's name was, and she said his name, and I'd never told my friends what her husband's name was. She told us that the dark figure with the hat on was an old spirit that had bad intentions, along with the spider-like creature that she said was a newer spirit that she didn't know much about. We were all shocked, to say the least. There's a little after that happened, but besides that, things have been getting a lot more paranormal. My parents getting their feet grabbed, lights turning off, and we all steadily see figures, which I'm still amazed about because neither of them before this believed in ghosts. My mom recently experienced something banging on my door and shaking my doorknob, almost like they're trying to get in. I guess this is the end of the story for now, though. My friend was messing with me from beyond the grave. Let me tell you a story about a small Midwestern town with a population of around 500 people. I, being in my early 20s, work in an adjacent town that's about 10 or 15 minutes away. 1 week ago, a good friend of mine, whom we'll call L, passed away unexpectedly. The entire community was devastated by his loss because he was a well-loved and respected member of the town. Every morning on his way to work, I passed by his girlfriend's house. Today, as I was driving my usual route, I couldn't help but feel like L paid me a visit as I passed by her house. It felt like he was watching over his girlfriend and thought, now's my chance to fuck with him. Just like he used to do when he was alive. I mean, why couldn't he do things like this in the afterlife, right? As I continued driving, something strange happened. On my keychain, I have a key locator, which is basically a tiny speaker that beeps when you press the button on the remote. Suddenly, as I was passing by his girlfriend's house, the beeper started going off. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I was momentarily scared shitless. But then I realized that it was probably L, and I could almost hear him laughing at me as I sat in the car. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, a stray signal from something in the car that set off the beeper. But something in me just knew that it was L and he was trying to communicate with me. Maybe it was his way of letting us know that he was okay, and wherever he is now, he's watching over us. The past few nights, I haven't been able to sleep, thinking about L and his sudden passing. But after this experience, I feel a little bit better. It gives me a sense of relief and closure, knowing that he's okay and watching over his girlfriend. I know it may sound crazy to some people, but I truly believe that our loved ones can communicate with us from beyond the grave. And for me, this experience was another reminder that there's so much we don't understand about the afterlife and what truly lies beyond. The cats are interdimensional beings. As the days passed, I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something strange about Simon's disappearance. It wasn't just the fact that he had vanished without a trace, but the eerie sense that I was being watched. It was as if someone or something was observing me from the shadows, waiting for the night, the moment to reveal itself. Then one night I had a vivid dream, which I was walking through a strange otherworldly landscape. The sky was a deep shade of purple, and the ground was made of a soft, spongy material that gave way beneath my feet. In the distance, I saw a figure that resembled Simon, his eyes glowing like two embers in the darkness. As I approached him, he turned and scampered away, disappearing into the shadows. When I woke up, I was filled with a sense of unease. Was it just a dream, or was it something more? I couldn't help but wonder if Simon had somehow led me into a different dimension. one that had existed parallel to our own. As I continued to research the topic of teleportation in cats, I came across a wealth of information about the mystical and supernatural properties of felines. According to ancient legends, cats were revered as sacred creatures that possessed magical powers, including the ability to cross between worlds and communicate with spirits. One theory suggested that cats were capable of harnessing a form of energy known as quantum entanglement, which allowed them to move more freely between different dimensions without being constrained by the laws of physics. Another theory proposed that cats were actually extraterrestrial beings, sent to Earth to observe and guide humanity in its evolution. Whether or not these theories had any basis in reality, one thing is clear. There was much more to cats than meet the eye. As I looked at Simon's empty food dish, I couldn't help but wonder where he had gone and what secrets he had taken with him. The mysteries of the universe were vast and unfathomable, and I realized that perhaps we're all just scratching the surface of what's truly possible. My childhood home, unexplained occurrences, and paranormal encounters. As you continue to reflect on the strange occurrences that happened in your childhood home, new memories and details flood back to you, painting a more vivid picture of the otherworldly presence that resided there. You recall the sensation of being watched, even when you were alone in your room. It was as if there was a pair of eyes following your every move, but when you turned to look, no one was there. This feeling was particularly strong in the attic, where you always felt like something was lurking in the shadows. There were also strange smells that would come and go without explanation. Sometimes it was a sweet floral scent, while other times it was a musty, unpleasant odor that made you feel sick to your stomach. It was as if the entity in the house was trying to communicate with you through your senses. But perhaps the most unnerving experience was the time you woke up in the middle of the night to find an old woman sitting at the foot of your bed. She wore a long white gown and had a serene expression on her face. You couldn't see through her, but you could tell she was not of this world. You tried to scream, but no sound would come out. Eventually she disappeared, leaving you trembling in fear. These experiences have stayed with you throughout the years, and you share them with others, and you realize that many people have had similar encounters. You wonder what it all means and why these entities choose to reveal themselves in such strange ways. Despite the fear and uncertainty that these experiences brought, you can't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the time you spent in that house. It's as if the entity was trying to tell you something, to show you that there's more to this world than what meets the eye, and even though you may never fully understand what happened in that house, you know that it'll always be part of you. Shadow figure. When I was 9 or 10 years old, something truly strange and frightening happened. I was walking down the stairs in my house when I suddenly felt compelled to look up, and as I did, I saw a tall black figure moving quickly across the room. It had no limbs, just a dark, ominous shape that moved too quickly to be seen. My brother was downstairs at the time, and the figure certainly wasn't him. I told my mom about the experience, but she brushed it off and said nothing. It wasn't until I was 14 that my mother revealed a shocking truth about our home. Apparently, before our family moved in, someone had used a Ouija board in the house and left it open. This had apparently made the spirit of an old man who had died in the house more active. The spirit was said to have thrown clothes on the floor and scratched my mother. When my mother didn't catch on, the spirit started to target the children because they were younger and more vulnerable. Despite my mother's claims that the spirit had been expelled by a priest, I continued to experience strange occurrences in the house. You could hear noises coming from the walls and see objects moving out of the corner of your eye and experience bangs in the night. Even more frighteningly, you would hear whispers of your name and other strange things. I was convinced that whatever was in the house was not truly gone, despite the priest's best efforts. In fact, I had a nagging feeling that the spirit is still present, watching over me, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known once again. This has me feeling a constant sense of unease and anxiety, wondering where the spirit will strike next. The memory of the black figure that moved across the room all those years ago has never left my mind, and I'm haunted by the fear of what might be lurking in the shadows of my home. Did you have an inexplicably weird and impossible thing happen to you as a kid? The individual's memories of teleportation and flying may seem fantastical and unbelievable, but there have been other cases of people claiming to have experienced similar phenomena. One such case is that of Carlos Castaneda, a controversial writer and anthropologist who claimed to have learned shamanic techniques from the Yaqui Indian named Don Juan Matus. Castaneda wrote extensively about his experiences, including his ability to teleport and to transform into a bird or a coyote. While Castaneda's claims have been widely criticized and debunked, his writings have inspired a whole generation of seekers who believe in the possibility of accessing higher states of consciousness and transcending the limitations of the physical world. Another case worth mentioning is that of the so-called Philadelphia experiment, a supposed secret experiment conducted by the U.S. Navy during World War II, in which a warship, the USS Eldridge, was said to have been made invisible and teleported from one location to another. While there's no concrete evidence to support the claims, the story's become super popular as an urban legend and has been the subject of numerous books, films, and TV shows. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these stories is not whether they're true or not, but what they reveal about our deepest desires and fears. The idea of being able to teleport or fly may seem like a childhood fantasy, but it also taps into our yearning for freedom, adventure, and transcendence. At the same time, it reflects our fear of being trapped in a mundane and limited existence, and our longing to break free from the constraints of time and space. In a way, the fact that these stories persist and continue to fascinate us is a testament to the enduring power of the human imagination. Our ability to envision new possibilities, to dream of a better world, and to explore the unknown is what's driven us to achieve great things throughout history. Whether or not we ever truly teleport or fly, the fact that we can imagine is a testament to the boundless potential of the human mind. I just want to share a funny and strange experience over a decade ago, plus a discussion question. When I was around 8 years old, I was staying over at a friend's house for the night, and it seemed like an ordinary evening. I was heading up with my friend to the bedroom to settle in for the night. However, what happened next would stay with me for years to come. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by a familiar tune of the theme song of What's New, Scooby-Doo playing in my head. This might not have been unusual in and of itself, as the song was catchy and it often played on TV shows. However, the time is what made it strange. It was around 1 a.m., and the song was playing loudly and clearly. At first, I assumed it was just my imagination, as I know the song well, and I could easily imagine it playing in my head. However, the song just kept playing and repeating without any interruptions. If it was all in my head, I would have been distracted by another song or something at some point. Feeling curious and a bit spooked, I decided to investigate. I snooped around the house, all the while still hearing the song at the same volume, but couldn't find any TV or radio playing the song. I was completely baffled. After about 20 minutes of listening to the song repeat endlessly, I eventually tried to go back to sleep and the song finally stopped. It was as if someone had suddenly shut off the source of the music, and the silence that followed was deafening. While I had experienced other paranormal events in the past, including things moving on their own, in particular, the experience of a song poltergeist was unlike anything that I've ever encountered before. To this day, I wonder what exactly caused that eerie and inexplicable playing of the Scooby-Doo theme song in the middle of the night. I admit that I almost wish it would happen again, just so I could relive the surreal experience one more time. Ghost has been mimicking me twice now, maybe more, I don't know. When it comes to unexplainable occurrences, some people may be more skeptical and dismissive, while others are open-minded and intrigued by the possibilities. For the latter group, stories like this one can be fascinating, and perhaps even a bit eerie. The story takes place in a family home where the narrator lives with their mother, stepfather, and sister. It was around December, a time when people believe the veil between the physical world and the spiritual world is quite thin, and paranormal activity can increase. One night the mother was awoken by the narrator, who supposedly came into her room and said they were going to the bathroom. The stepfather heard the voice as well, but didn't see anyone in the room. The mother got up and went to check on the narrator, only to find them sound asleep in their own room. What makes this story even more intriguing is the fact that the narrator has seen several people saying that child ghosts often mimic other people. This raises the question, was the voice of the mother and stepfather actually the narrator, or was it something else entirely? Could it have been a ghostly presence in the house, mimicking the narrator's voice in an attempt to make contact? It's also worth noting that the narrator mentions feelings like people may think they're crazy for sharing the story. This is a common fear among those that have experienced paranormal phenomena, as there can be a stigma attached to such experiences. However, it's important to remember that everyone's reality is unique, but just because something can't be explained by science or logic doesn't mean it isn't real. As the narrator continues to live in the house, they may experience more strange occurrences and continue to wonder about the mysterious voice that woke their mother up that night. It's impossible to say for sure what happened, but one thing is certain. Stories like this one will continue to captivate and intrigue those who are open to the idea that there may be more to the world than what we can see and touch. My experience about living in a haunted house in a ghost town, and I want to hear other scary experiences. When I was younger, I had an experience that still haunts me to this day. It all started with my sister, and we were on vacation with her aunt to a small ghost town in South Dakota. I was around 12 at the time, and we experienced what was one of the scariest things I've ever encountered. There were several other instances that happened during our stay, but I want to focus on the one that scared me the most. It was still light outside around 2 p.m., and her aunt had gone out to get groceries with my cousins. My sister and I stayed home, hanging out in the living room while I played a game on my laptop. Suddenly we heard a door close upstairs. It made us both jump, but we didn't think much of it at first. A few minutes later, we heard the water from the sink in the restroom upstairs start running. This was strange because no one was supposed to be up there. I sat there for about a minute, waiting to see if it would turn off or if I could hear someone moving around, but there was nothing. Suddenly we heard the sound of a cup being filled with water and then just dropped on the floor. It happened 5 or 6 times, each time a cup being filled with water and then falling to the ground. My sister and I were frozen with fear, unable to move or even speak. Finally, my sister mustered up the courage to go upstairs, and I followed her. I ended up in front of her, slowly walking up to the restroom where we could hear the cup fall one last time. I opened the door and found nothing. No water, no cup, nothing. It was just empty, regular restroom. After we wrapped our heads around what had just happened, we ran downstairs, and I tried to open the door, but I felt like I was getting choked up. Then we heard the restroom door close and the water turn on again. We were both terrified and ended up opening the door and waiting outside, crying our eyes out. Looking back on that experience, I still can't explain what happened that day. It was something that I'll never forget. It still sends shivers down my spine to this day. Haunted Childhood Home. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm currently 22 years old, and I've currently been interested in the paranormal. I set out to write about all of my experiences that I can recall, the longest one being about a house I lived in as a kid. I'm from Denmark, so obviously my grammar isn't going to be perfect, but I'll try my best. Haunted house stories from my childhood home. A little background. My mom, my then stepdad, our dog, and me moved into this house when I was 12. It was actually a basement apartment where people living upstairs that had rented out the basement. It's kind of confusing, but it was actually pretty big. We moved out when I was 16, so this happened in a span of 4 years. So anyways, we moved in and everything was well. A week after we moved in, I had my friend over to see our new living space, and I was really excited to show her. My dog, a very peaceful, quiet, lazy, and just not violent at all kind of dog, went into my room and started barking his head off. He never barked. He was standing on 2 feet and barking at the corner of my bed. It was really weird. So here I am trying to calm my dog down, but he just won't give up. When standing on 2 legs, which he was, he's my height. And for some reason, neither my mom or my stepdad hear it. And we even hear the door open. So I went out to get them while my friend was freaking out, and he calmed down like nothing happened. That was the first weird thing that happened in that house, but not the last. We would occasionally hear high heels walking above us, chairs being pulled out and very loud bangs, all coming from upstairs. So we asked them if anything had happened, and they told us no, they were asleep. It would always happen at night, and it wasn't until they were on vacation the noises continued that we started feeling weird. They had an alarm, so as well as it would go off about once a week for no apparent reason, they never really spoke about it. I remember we would eat in the kitchen and all of us would turn our heads up the hallway at the same time because we all thought we saw someone. It was so weird. It happened all the time, and it was just because it was the norm. We told ourselves it was our imagination. We often thought someone had broken in, and countless times my stepdad went with a flashlight, but there's no one. I would often wake up hearing noises in the kitchen, thinking my mom had woken up, hearing sounds that sounded like cooking. I'd come to soon realize every time I heard those noises, there was no one there. The noises would always stop when I entered the kitchen. The scariest thing to happen in that house, though, was my stepdad. I went into their room, and they had just woken up, and he said, "Why are you up early today?" And I was like, "No, I just woke up." And as I said, all the light from his eyes just vanished. He told me and my mom that he got woken up by what he thought was me staring at them. And then he asked me, what was wrong, and I didn't say anything. I just kept staring until I walked away. He said that the girl he saw was wearing a white dress and had long black hair. I have brown hair and I don't own a white nightgown, so I don't know why he thought that was me. So sometime later we had dinner with our neighbors where the topic came up. They told us that there was a freaking murder in this house, like a girl actually got killed, and they even had the newspaper article about it. It happened right outside my room. The girl who got killed was pregnant. The man who got her pregnant already had a wife, so he killed her and tried to make it look like a suicide, which he apparently was really bad at. The time we lived in the house was actually some of the greatest years. I spent 4 years in that house, and all those years were filled with depression and anxiety. I never had hope. It was always like a cloud of black smoke, and it was hanging around me. Only in the house, though. I remember clearly that every time I went out, I was happy, and I thought it was weird. I told my mom about it, and she told me the same thing happened to her. Another thing about the house is that things would go missing, and we would look everywhere for them. And then the next day, it would show up on the table like something really obvious, where we already looked. I was so attached to that house, I didn't want to leave my room. I always made excuses not to leave the house, and I was just miserable. I would have really bad nightmares of a tall black figure in our living room with the biggest grin on his face. I've never been so scared from a nightmare, and I was really scared to be in the living room alone. One night, this really dark, and I don't know why I'm sharing this, but as I mentioned, I was in a really dark period of my life, and I was in the bathroom, one of the darkest places in the whole house, and I was looking in the mirror, and my eyes were black, and I started smiling. I was crying dark, thick liquid out of my eyes. Honestly, that's so fucked up, I know. Honestly, this was the only thing happening in the mirror, not in real life. The last thing I remember is me reading a book late one night and I saw a dark figure out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look and there's nothing. It happens a few moments later again, and I look and my blanket in the chair is swinging back and forth like someone had just walked into it. It was a summer night and I had no windows open, so it scared me a lot. I just put my blanket over my head and tried to sleep. My mom also told me that she went to pee late at night. She thought my stepdad was on the computer. So, right as she was closing the bathroom door, the man sitting on the computer waved and smiled at her, and she waved back, thinking it was my stepdad. And when she got out, the computer was off, and my stepdad was fast asleep. She woke him up asking him if he was on the computer, to which he replied, very confused. Apparently, he had been asleep for some time. Some other random stories. It's hard to imagine it's real, but I remember it so vividly. We were moving into an apartment. I was about 4. I was standing in my new room when my dad said, "I'll turn off all the lights. Are you coming?" And at that time, I was really afraid of the dark. But for some reason, I said I wanted to stay. So we turned off all the lights and everything got pitch black. And I saw a girl. I wasn't scared. She wouldn't talk, but I tried talking to her. She was a little bit older than me, maybe 6 or 7. I thought she was an angel because I didn't know what ghosts were back then. But I didn't know. She was in this glowing white light, and it just felt so pure I can't explain it. My dad got back and turned the light on, and again she was gone. I never saw her again, but I thought about her a lot. Me and my boyfriend were sleeping. I have to pee in the middle of the night, and I open the door and hear people talking in the living room. I was scared shitless until I realized it's a video from my boyfriend's computer. The weird thing is, the screen is closed and it's turned off. So he had to turn it on in order to close the video. That's still so weird, like how does that even happen? It was so loud and the volume was all the way up. He swore that he had the volume turned off on the laptop and it made no sense. From 18 to 20, I lived in a place with staff who can help you because of my anxiety and autism. One day I'm in my living room listening to loud music when I hear my front door open. I assume it's someone who works here, so I stop the music and look. It's a man in an orange vest. Worker clothes, maybe if you're an electrician or something, and he has a tool bag with him as well. I'm hella confused and just look at him. For some reason, he doesn't look at me at all. We never make eye contact, and he was probably just standing in my kitchen for like 10 minutes. I was so confused, because I wasn't expecting anyone to come and look or anything. After 10 minutes, again with no eye contact, he just walks out again. So I contact the workers, and is like, "Who's that guy that was just here?" And they're like, "What guy?" I explain what happened, and she looks worried. So she asks her boss, "Are they expecting handymans or something coming on?" And they weren't. No one had seen this guy. It was like he just vanished. They go on and asked if I had dreamed it, and I'm like, I was jamming to music like I wasn't sleeping at all. They couldn't explain it, and I don't know if it was paranormal, but it was definitely weird. I've also had dreams where my mom was in a hospital. I call her and tell her about my dream, and she goes on to tell me she was actually in the hospital that day. I've had so many dreams about my mom come true, it's really weird. All in all, I think that me being autistic and a bit sensitive, I definitely attract these things. Ghost Doctor. In my late 20s, I had to undergo surgery to remove my gallbladder due to intense pain caused by an inflamed pancreas. The doctors had me on a strong pain medication, specifically Dilaudid, for a couple of weeks. During this time, I found myself in and out of sleep, and my experiences during that unconscious state left me questioning the nature of reality itself. While my surgical team and nurses were all very kind and professional, there was one mysterious visitor that left me feeling unsettled. Late at night, when I was alone in my room with no family or nurses present, a young doctor would appear seemingly out of nowhere to check on me. I remember him being fairly good-looking and dressed in a white coat, but beyond that, I couldn't recall any details about his appearance. Strangely enough, he never touched me, nor did he take any notes or perform any tests. Instead, he would simply stand at the foot of my bed and ask if I was feeling. Was I feeling well? And after that, he would promptly leave. I initially assumed that this was a routine checkup, but the fact that he would only come when no one else was around left me feeling suspicious. I tried asking the nurses about the young doctor, but to my surprise, they had no idea who I was referring to. They even reported that there were no doctors scheduled to visit my wing of the hospital during the late-night hours. But despite this, the young doctor continued to make his mysterious visits. I saw him about 4 times throughout my stay in the hospital, always when I was alone and always late at night around 2 a.m. As time went on, I couldn't help but wonder if the young doctor was just a figment of my imagination, aside of the powerful pain medication I was on. But the memory of his visits were so clear and vivid that it left me feeling unsure. Was there really a young doctor visiting me late at night? Or was this all just a hallucination? And if it was real, why was he only coming when no one else was around? Even after my discharge from the hospital and my eventual recovery, I still find myself thinking about that mysterious young doctor. Was he some kind of supernatural being, visiting me during my most vulnerable moments? Or was it just a strange coincidence that he would always show up when I was alone? Perhaps one day I will find the answers to these questions. Until then, the memory of the young doctor will remain a mystery that leaves me feeling both intrigued and unsettled. Experience from when I was a child. As I delve into this story, I can sense the intense curiosity and bewilderment of the narrator regarding the strange occurrence that happened to them when they were just a child. The vividness of the memory, despite it happening decades ago, is a testament to how deeply it affected them. The story begins with the narrator recounting a typical childhood experience of riding a bike along a grassy path with hills on one side. However, on this particular day, something caught their attention, something that was not usual. They came across a part of the hill that was a burnt charcoal black, revealing the inside of a cabin that was also burnt and resembled charcoal. The description of the scene sets the tone for the eerie encounter that the narrator would soon have. Inside the burnt cabin, the narrator described seeing a 4-legged table, a campfire with a cauldron on top, and a stereotypical witch wearing black robes and a pointed hat. The witch was short, and even though she had no face, the narrator recalls her telling them to come inside. Despite the witch's invitation, the narrator felt an instinctive urge not to go. The narrator sensed that the witch could not come out, but if they went inside, they'd not be able to come out either. The narrator's recollection of the encounter with the witch is quite detailed and evokes a sense of unease in the reader. The fact that they still remember it so vividly after 20-odd years is quite remarkable. And it even went back to the site of the burnt cabin with their friends, but to their surprise, there was nothing there, just the usual grassy hill. This further adds to the mystery of the incident and raises more questions than answers. It's interesting to note that the narrator felt compelled to create a Reddit account to share their story. They were clearly seeking answers or validation of what they were experiencing, and it wasn't their imagination running wild. The fact that they needed to use a separate account highlights the personal nature of this experience and how it affected them. As I try to make sense of this strange occurrence, I can't help but wonder if it's just a figment of the narrator's imagination, or if there was something more to it. Perhaps it was a residual energy from the past event, or even a supernatural encounter. The lack of evidence makes it difficult to draw any conclusions, but one thing's for sure. This experience left a lasting impression on the narrator and will continue to intrigue them for years to come.